Mr. Brent Kelly, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Joey. It's great to hear you and see you.
It has been too long since we have seen and heard each other, has it not been?
It has been. Some people now count our conversations by what new kids we've had, maybe in some cases. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's when you really know you're getting old, is when you can start to judge it based on, did I have this extra human being in my
Yeah,
possession the last
yeah,
time we spoke?
yeah.
In which, in this case, I don't get to say this often, but you one up me in that department as well. So all the way around, you're just showing me how to live maybe a better life. I'm not sure how that goes.
Well, thanks, I guess.
Yeah.
With that, I've got five kids, and people oftentimes say, "Oh, I only have two," or "I only have four," and I try to tell them that it's not a competition. But thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly not. And when you're on those positions, when you do only have two in your possession or at your immediate like vicinity, it feels strangely like a vacation. It's hard to
Yeah,
explain to people.
yeah,
Um,
true.
Speaking of which, how have you been getting along during this sort of time of bringing all the people very close to you together for a very long extended period of time? We're starting to get out of that now, but
Yeah.
how has work kind of transitioned for you, and what are you seeing in terms of that effect on sort of the independent agent?
Yeah, I mean, for a couple sides of things, from a personal life side of things, like all of us. I mean, here it's just the new way of living for a certain period of time, and it's so I think it's an adjustment. I think for me, it's one of those where um, a lot of go-getters like to have a specific plan. And in many cases, you're like, I don't know what that plan is now because I don't know when or how long or what it's going to look like, or what the impact is. So I think it's just trying to balance the fact that I still want to be proactive and intentional, but yet also give some grace in the fact that there's going to be some things that I'm not aware of are going to happen, and just you got to roll with the punches a little bit. So kind of that aspect from a pure work standpoint and working with insurance agencies and just the industry itself. I think it's similar, but on a larger scale. It's this idea of whether it's working from home or using technology or diving deeper maybe in processes in our business. We look at things a little bit differently. One side note, and this is maybe not part of your question, but it something that came up in an earlier conversation I had today. Is I think for a lot of us, it's caused us to stop and reflect and think maybe more than we've had in the past, because we could be just busy running here and there and commuting and in the office and out of the office and then off to the a baseball game, or who knows, activities, music, sports, whatever it is. And it's like, oh my, we run so many miles an hour, and we're like, are we going the right way? And now some cases, whether it's personally or for me working with agencies and individual professionals, it's like, am I going about this the right way? Is there a better way? Do I need to redirect myself? So I think there's some more reflection.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I enjoy having my weekends back, or had having my weekends back. That was
Yeah,
that was a revelation. I
yeah,
didn't really quite know what it felt like, and I think you're right. I think it has sort of forced you to really take a look at, wow, what is happening here. I've got all this extra room or space now, just in terms of the stuff that I'm not being distracted by.
yeah.
You're a big leadership guy, right? And so leadership's hard, really, in any environment. But what have you seen in terms of leadership from afar? How do you think agency owners should be sort of continuing to steer the ship, even though in a lot of cases, and again, this is maybe a part two of that question. Some agencies maybe never even closed because they didn't necessarily have, they only
Right,
had 5 to 10 people.
right.
um, what are you seeing in terms of that aspect moving forward for them?
I think for the majority of agencies that I talk to and work with, and just from industry, professionals out there, the word that comes to mind is just intentional when it comes to leadership. And a lot of this is with communication. When I think of leadership, it's how am I communicating the message, the things that we want to do, the things that we're not doing. And I think what I've seen a little bit has been the fact that as a leadership, and again, some agencies, it hasn't changed much. Maybe some of smaller agencies that had a lot of change, at least is how they work day to day. But a lot of them they have. And so what used to be, I could bump into you walking down the hallway, or I could step into your office, or just say, hey, how's it going? whatever the case may be, kind of more reactionary conversation leadership has now been, we have to make sure we're doing a weekly team meeting with emphasis, that I have a purpose, that I'm prepared, or that our daily huddles have a point. And what I found, maybe this isn't surprising, is that a lot of people are going, why haven't we been doing this for a long period of time? You know, A, we're not interrupting each other all day long. And B, we actually have a meeting or a conversation with purpose versus just random stuff. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm seeing.
The interruptions are very real, and whether I guess you're at home or at the office, they're basically unavoidable. But I think there's maybe again, just back to that reflection, there's maybe more sort of awareness to them now of like, hey, I'm not popping in somebody's office, they're not popping into my office. So this might be a sort of, again, a two-part situation. How have you seen that maybe impacting the agencies in terms of a productivity standpoint of maybe not dealing with those things anymore? And kind of two, have you seen sort of a recalibration of that efficiency in terms of meetings and communications? Have you seen something that's clicking with some agencies versus others? What is working?
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. So the idea, one thing that we teach and talk a lot with our clients at Sitkins and more is about going deeper in the right stuff without less scattered things. And I was just thinking, as we're talking about communication interruptions, like, and maybe this has been discussed before, but it's funny. It's like when you're at an office and you're constantly interrupted, we have our own self interruptions, which is checking our phone, right? Or whatever that may be. But then we have people walking in and then, you know, phone calls and dings and pings and all those kind of things that happen throughout the day. And I'm just trying to imagine, you know, from the work from home component, just look at that for a second. If I'm working on a specific project or a task, could you imagine in the world of Zoom, like, or whatever it is platform you're using, that just people just randomly popped on your screen and said, hey, just want to say, hey, and you're like, yeah, I'm working on something, right? And we laugh about it, but that's what happens when we're in proximity to each other quite a bit, is that we have a complete lack of respect for each other's time. And I don't think it's because we're mean or mean-spirited. Some of it's just normal habits. But I think when you say recalibration, I think I've seen agencies that at least are being more intentional, more focused on what are the deeper, more meaningful things that we should be doing. Because when all the quote unquote crap goes away, by the way, crap also is an acronym for can't resist attracting paper, whatever it is, right? But it's just the stuff that goes around, that spins around. We go, well, now what do I do? Well, now you do the real work that actually makes an impact. And we don't, you know, at least I'll raise my hand. I find myself, when work gets hard and I have to think about something or really dive deep into a project, I'm easy to go to email or to look at Facebook or whatever the case may be. So I think it's more of a mindset of, am I doing the right work? And one example, I'll just give one example that I see this when it comes to communication. We work a lot from the agency side of sales and service, communicating at a higher level. And we'll talk about having a high performance team or high performance team meetings. And when we're in proximity, a lot of it is, oh, hey, okay, I'm working on this, doing that, great. And then we interrupt each other all week. What I've heard from agencies is that sales and service are actually having impactful conversations that have, again, substance. But here's what I really need to do this week. This is what I need from you. This is what you need from me. So I think when it comes to recalibration, again, it goes back to that reflection and focus of, is this 30 minutes? Is it really meaningful? And if it's not, why am I doing it? And if it, you know, if it's average, how can we make it better? Because now it's the interruptions of my kid needs something down the hall, right? Or whatever it is. So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but that's just what came to mind when you asked.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, again, like you said, like you're playing in this sort of this game of windows, right? Before the house decides to erupt and God knows what's going to happen next, right? So you're being very efficient. You know, what I'm always curious too is that, and what I've seen a little bit is there might be sort of an overcompensation at first, right? You know, is like, oh, let's have all these meetings. You know, we got to stay way connected, and like you said, I think being more intentional about the efficiency that comes out of that, and maybe I was kind of curious if you were to dive into some more of the right work, right? Like, you know, if you had to pull out some of the tasks that you would qualify as right work in terms of, you know, maybe from the principal's perspective and maybe from, you know, an established producer's perspective, I mean, what is that right work?
Well, I mean, obviously the basic answer is it varies, but I mean, just to give you some examples, I mean, I think oftentimes, to go back, one of my favorite books that I read in 2019 was The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And in that book, one of the very first chapters, or maybe it's the preface, I don't even know, it just says, running the wrong way enthusiastically is stupid. And I like wrote that down and put there, and I'm like, how many times have I been running really enthusiastically and going the wrong direction? And so a lot of it to me comes back to like looking at from an agency perspective of, well, we've always done it this way. Well, ask yourself why, and is there a better way, a more efficient way of doing it? And if the answer is, well, yeah, we probably need to, for example, actually look at our renewal or our continuation process, as we call it, right? What does it actually look like? Are we really maximizing that? Well, no. And then we think it, what usually happens is we'll go, yeah, we should work on that. We should improve that. And then 2 weeks go by and we go, oh yeah, that renewal process, we were going to work on it. We didn't. So for an example, be, okay, if we're going to improve the renewal process as one example, what does it look like? What are the tangible steps? And let's actually dive deep into that and get everybody involved. What's it like for you, for me? How do we get it better? That would be meaningful. That actually relates to the client experience versus just reacting to emails all day or whatever the case may be. And we got to set a time for that because that's always going to happen. But it would be going deeper into whatever process. It could be the sales process. It could be our continuation process. It could be diving deeper in looking at agency profitability. Why aren't we profitable as we should be? Well, we're not doing this and this. Well, what should we do? We can't do it all. What's the one thing we should do? So we focus a lot as coaches of all these things that are floating around. What really is the most impactful, the vital few versus the trivial many, and actually diving deep into that and executing. I think that's the key word, is to execute on something, not just talk about it. And as a person who likes shiny objects, I have to take my own medicine because I deal with that too. Like, let's go to the next thing. Well, you didn't finish what you started. Like, finish that first. So that's what we're saying.
I love that you brought up the shiny objects because that's a very real thing. I mean, really, just in life. But is there a balance to sort of dealing with that? Because you do need a little flicker, a little glimmer in your life every now and then, right? So, I mean, how do you stay disciplined on the task at hand while still keeping your options open for something that is shiny on the outside?
I'll just speak for myself, and I struggle with this, but I've gotten a lot better over the last few years because I am the king of shiny object syndrome. And I could be the person that would have a great idea and then look at Facebook and then go to YouTube and then go to my email and then back to Facebook and then to LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden 2 hours later, I'm like, whoops. So for me, Joey, it's about, I like the concept that I learned from Darren Hardy about sprint and recover, that you look at athletes, for example, and just look at sprinters. They'll sprint, but they also know they've got to recover. And so to me, it's like, if I can give 60 minutes, whatever, you can use whatever number you want. You can say 30, 45, 90, I don't care. But if I can give 60 minutes of like pure disciplined, focused, deep work time into something without distractions, no dings, no pings. We had an agency that we work with on this, and they actually put they got to be committed. They got to be accountable. They put a sign on their door when they were before COVID that said, "Opportunities in progress, please do not disturb." And it's this nice way of saying, don't knock on my door. But it's not to be rude. Like you can never get around me. But I think the idea is, okay, if I give 60 minutes or whatever that number is of a sprint, then I get 30 minutes of recovery or whatever that time is. Right. Yeah. And that could be whatever. I need some play time because your brain can't focus that much that long without not being, your effectiveness goes way down. So to me, it's okay. It's like it's probably not a good analogy here, Joey, but it's like if I eat really good all week, then I get the pizza on Friday.
Yep. Yeah. I think we've talked about the pizza before, our Friday pizza obsessions. I like the opportunities in progress. That's a very nice spin on the situation. I personally like to, I always kind of judge it by, have I lost track of time, right? If I don't know what time it is, then it's like I've really gone deep into this is a funny story. One time I actually was into something so deep that I was late picking up my son from preschool. This goes way back. And that's when I realized, hey, I can set timers on my phones. And I think that's where, for me, sometimes I have to be cautious of, do I have enough time to before my next thing, before I dive into it? Is there any, and I think too, there's maybe some sort of reluctancy to shut everything off. Like something is going to happen that they're going to miss. And I've always kind of pushed back on that. What are your thoughts on, listen, that thing, that alarm, that fire that's going on with that client, right now is going to probably be okay in 60 minutes. It's just more important to them than it is to you. And it feels like it's more important. And I
Yes.
feel like there's this reaction thing that sometimes we get overtaken by.
Yeah. Well, and first of all, I mean, it does depend on, I mean, your specific role, right? If you were and again, it could be a lot of different things, but if you were one of those that, part of your responsibility and role for whatever position is that when someone gets something you need to get back to them in 10 minutes, well, then that's a different story. But that's very rare that people have that specific position. I think what happens, and I wrote that down as you were saying it, is that it's very easy for us as humans, and I've seen this in my coaching and training, to make the exception, and sometimes the very rare exception, the rule. Right? Because this one time 3 years ago, this person called and I didn't get back to them in 10 minutes. They were mad. Although 99.9% of the time, if you were to reach out to someone, right, whether it's email or leave a voicemail or I don't care, Facebook Messenger, right, whatever it is in form of communication, and they don't get back to you right away, what do most people generally think?
Yes, I mean, he must be busy.
He's busy. They're doing something. Like they weren't just waiting for me to email them right this second. Right. Like, I mean, especially when you think about positioning yourself as a professional, whatever your role is. Like if I'm a true professional and we are in this industry, then I need to realize that my time is as valuable as someone else's if I'm doing the right work, right? I can't just be screwing off. But I mean, if I'm doing the right things, and I will tell you, one of the things for me, Joey, is I had gone through this. There are some people I know that check their email once a day at the end of the day. And that's crazy for some people. Like I couldn't even imagine that. Mm-hmm. I started going where it was like every 5 minutes, right? And then I got to like, okay, now wait a second. What if I do an hour and then my reward is checking email, which generally is nothing, right? And so I think there's got to be that like transition, like a lot of things for people. Maybe it's not a cold turkey approach, and it depends on your role and position. But the fact of it is, if the emphasis of getting back to something within 2 minutes, and if you don't, is typically hogwash completely. It's our own head trash. And typically it's our own head trash because that work is easy. Back to the deep work concept. Like it's easy to react. Oh, I got an email. Look how busy I am. Look at me. I'm getting back to someone in 3 minutes. They don't really care. You just feel good because you're doing something. Because the thing that you weren't doing is what's really important. That's actually hard. And that's what I've had to learn. And I have to be honest with myself sometimes. Like, why am I really doing this? It's because that got hard. And so I went to what's easy.
Yeah. I mean, so much that I agree with there. One of the things that, you mentioned in terms of, getting back to somebody, I think too, this also speaks to the process and diving into things, it's also setting expectations, right? So can you create a process that sets the proper expectation to where, yes, hey, by the way, you got somebody answering the phone. Hey, Steve is in a opportunities in progress session. He'll get back to you in 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever, right? It's just having somebody on the front that's kind of plugged into that. And I think that's something that's very simple. That is, I don't want to say overlooked a lot, but it wouldn't be that hard to sort of just say, share your calendar with the person and at the front desk and just set an expectation for when that return phone call could happen.
Yeah, and I love what you said, the expectation. And a lot of what we talk about, and this is more specific even to producers or agents, but it could be true for anybody. But it's education. It's what you just said. I mean, I got to educate you. If typically in the sales world, and I was so guilty. That's funny. We talk about it. And I see agents that do all the time. It's like we're having a conversation, a sales call, and you're gonna be my new client, Joey. And I will say something like this: "Hey, Joey. By the way, if you need anything, man, anything at all, here's this. Here's my number. You get back. I'll get back to you right away. Like I'm your guy." And then we wonder why the expectation, as you just said, is the fact that, well, you didn't get back to me soon. Right. Whereas if I would say something like this: "Hey, Joey, as you know, right now as we're having this conversation, I want to make sure I'm fully present with you. I guarantee I've got some service needs coming in from other clients. That's why I have an amazing team. In fact, here's who they are. And so for anything that you need for day-to-day service or reactionary type of stuff, maybe you say it in a different way, but here's my team and they'll make sure they get a hold of you. Now, if you need something from me, I'll make sure I get back to you within whatever, right? 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever expectation you want to set." And most people would go, "Okay, sounds great." But we set ourselves up to fail, which is a problem.
Yeah, this is very fascinating. I'm gonna continue on this journey for a second, just because I think it's really important, right? I think this is a conversation that isn't maybe had enough, and I always found that if you demonstrated that expertise up front for them, they would be willing to wait for you. I kind of liken it more to like you're gonna wait 2 months to get a reservation at a really good restaurant, right?
Hmm.
It's balancing that, but at the same time, there's this on demand economy, right? There's this we want it now sort of thing. So we work in an industry that straddles between those two sort of expectations, where we are professionals, where we are sort of managing our time, but at the same time we are trying to make it easier for people to do business with us. And how would you sort of kind of summarize that, and maybe kind of say agents should approach both of those sort of aspects?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it does, part of it is depending on your team and your team structure, I think is first, because again, if whatever your role may be, it may be a little different, and not everybody has the same team set up, and I appreciate that. But from a sales and service side of things, I think it's much easier to say, hey, listen, here's my role, right, and what I'll be accountable for, and I've got a team around me to help with some of these things. But I do think overall, from just the insurance world, there is that weird balance of we're ready to serve, we're quick to respond, versus we also have value. It's the idea that, if you were to call, if you had a medical condition right now, obviously if it's an emergency room, you want to get in right away. But you and I'm going here, like if you had an actual thing and they said, your doctor was like, actually, Joey, I'm free right now. Just come in about 5 minutes. I've been hanging out here today. You'd be like, do I really want to go see this person? Like, do they have any other clients? Are they any good? So there is kind of that balance. And I think what I continue to find in the agencies that we work with is that if you do have a unique process or a model that really is different outside of the most model, which we always joke at Sitkins is look, copy, quote, pray, and that's just, that's our process. What's your process? Well, we look, we copy, we quote, then we pray that we have a chance at it, or you don't go back to your agent. Well, there's not a lot of value in that. And so if that's my value that I'm providing to the world, whether I say it directly or it's just what we do, well, as a client, I'd go, I want it now then. What work are you really doing? And I think there's various aspects of that. But if there was we have a unique process, and here's some things that set us apart, which most agencies don't really do and talk about outside of generic stuff, then it becomes a transaction game. And there's a lot of different ways in that question, Joey. So I don't know if I'm answering it right, but I think it goes back to, was it Seth Godin who years ago had that concept of the race to the bottom?
Yep. Yeah.
And I think there's some aspect of that. There's some differences, but some aspect of that like, okay, if your goal is just to go faster and faster, you're running to the bottom. Whereas if I can go deeper, that makes this more meaningful or valuable and actually spend some time there, as we talked about earlier. Well, if I talk to people, I believe that I have a higher value. We do. So if you want to get back to me or talk to me, it might be a week or two. And now there's a lot of aspects that I know what I said depending on your role, but I just think majority of agencies out there that I initially talked to, if you said what really makes you unique and valuable, outside of getting some generic answers, I would get a very low response rate of anything that I'd go, oh, that's cool, that's different.
All right. Well, so let me ask this question then, because you kind of tippy-toed around it, Brent. I got to go right in at it. Is if you had to focus on the positive, how many agencies do you come across that do have that, that little something special to say? And even further, what is it?
So, and this is what do they say? 77% of statistics are made up. Yeah. So here's my answer to that. Yeah. I would tell you though, of agencies, if I said that have a defined, unique selling and continuation process, a true point of differentiation, maybe 2 to 5%, maybe. That would be my initial guess. And you say, well, what are they? Well, here's just some very basic things. Sometimes we think like it's got to be this major deal. I talked to another consultant in the industry, and she works with, I think, was it 3,500 agencies in different aspects and different components of the agency. And she told me that probably less than 5% of the agencies do a true annual risk review with their clients. So just that alone, like, to me, it's like, okay, we are an insurance risk management professional. Our job is to help our clients understand and control their true cost of risk. That's really what insurance is, right? To a degree. Yet 95% of them don't even do a risk review. We actually talk about some of these things. Now, are there transaction-based clients that would never want it anyway? Yeah, of course there are. But there are a lot that would go, what is that? So you say, what's deeper? Well, Joe, I mean, I could be talking to you as a future client and ask something about, or explain kind of our differentiation of doing a risk analysis or what that looks like. Hey, would you be able to share with me the copy of your current risk survey that you've conducted with your agent? What do you mean? Right? That alone would be like a new file that's in their brain that they've never heard before, which isn't that deep, right? So you could go all the way from that to, we do experience mod, right? I mean, you could, I mean, every agency's got unique things, but I think part of it is, and I always talk about the generic 5 when I'm doing teaching, which is, if people say, what makes you different? Well, we've got really good service. Oh, okay. What does that mean? Well, we just got really good service. Like, what agency doesn't say that, right? We're local. Okay, that could be good, but what does that mean, right? Because we know that's changed. We have the best people. Let me tell you, Joe, what makes us different is we really have the best people. Well, okay, like, does the other agency not have good people? No, their people are terrible, right? I mean, so we're independent. We represent all the markets. Well, so does all your competitors for the most part, except for some directs, right? So we say these things that are kind of generic, thinking that it's this great value, but instead we could be asking questions like, tell me about your current risk analysis, right? Or how do you currently mitigate your experience modification rate, right? Or could you show me a copy of your proactive service calendar that you currently use? No. Oh, so what happens right now is all of your conversations are reactionary. Well, and so I'm just kind of being tongue in cheek here a little bit off the cuff, but it doesn't take, I would say it doesn't take a lot more. It just takes more. And sometimes I think we put too much pressure that we don't have this really cool system because this big broker has this great model or a claims person on site. If you have that, great. But if you don't, just think of some basic things that most agencies don't do that you should.
Yeah, and it's something that I always kind of fall back on. Like I said, the one thing you always have, no matter where you are, in your agency sort of life or career or whatever, is the ability to make somebody feel relieved or whatever, right? Like they just feel like, oh, this is okay. Like we're good. And that sort of just like telling them something that immediately puts them at ease to the thing that you're trying to do. And that goes a long way. All right, Brent, I've got one more question for you.
All right.
Covered a lot of things, going deep on things, but what are you excited about moving forward that you want to go deep on, that you think the industry should be going deep on, that maybe might not be popular opinion at this point?
The last part kind of threw me off a little bit. I had some answers.
Pick and choose whichever part you want to answer. It's fine.
Well, you would say it may not be popular. I think, I don't know. One aspect, again, is my role as a coach and a consultant, and I do training out there. I think what's not popular is sometimes saying things that I see that are truthful that hurt people's feelings. And I'll get to the specifics around some of that, but it's just, truth hurts sometimes. And I've had it to me. So as a coach, one of the things that I've tried to do is realize that I want to add value to agencies and help them. And sometimes to help someone, I got to tell them the reality of things that I see. And this industry, we talk about all the time, is such a great industry. And I don't just say it, because I'm part of it. I mean, it really is. And I'm not saying it's recession proof, but you can look at the last few months in comparison to other places out there. It's a really good spot to be. It doesn't mean it doesn't have challenges, but it's a great industry. And because of that, we can get away with things in many cases a lot easier than other industries. I jokingly say, even from an agency or from a sales perspective, name me another profession that 90% of your people keep doing business with you, and half of them don't even know why, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, just keep going, like, keep paying me. Okay, what did you do? Nothing, right? And so that's the average part of it. And so I think from that aspect, it's being kind of truthful and honest, because I really have a passion to see agencies do more and be more. I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. The part as far as specifically goes back to what we just said. I think very few agencies have a defined selling and continuation process that they can rally behind. And it's got to be theirs. It's not what I say. It's got to be theirs. But really going deeper in that area of what does make us uniquely different. And I think what else is probably, I don't know if it's unpopular, but one of the key concepts we always talk around is 80-20. That 20% of something leads to 80% of something else. And we see it all the time in agency studies. And I mean, we've run thousands. I haven't personally, but at Sitkins, thousands. And typically 20% of your clients lead to 80% of your revenue. And so when you start to look at some of those things, what does that mean? It doesn't mean we just get rid of clients, but we have to approach things differently. So one of the things that I say and I believe is that you have to know specifically who it is you want and the clients that you need to give a higher level of attention and service to, and find ways to either, and the word gets kind of gets misconstrued, but trade down some other opportunities. Just because you can write every account doesn't mean you should and keep every account. And sometimes that becomes unpopular because, oh, you don't understand, and we need to represent everybody. You get to decide the model that you want to build. That's the great thing about this business. I just tell you what happens. And there's a quote from, I believe it's Warren Buffett, who said, when the tide goes out, we know who's been swimming naked. And when you think of COVID-19 and economic ramifications that'll continue, this will be a longer term economic deal, you'll know some of the agencies that have been doing okay because the water's been deep enough. Now it gets a little bit shallow and they go, oh crap, what are we going to do? It's because they haven't looked in awareness of, are we really profitable? Are we working with the right clients? Have we defined who we really are and what we want? Or have we been just doing what everyone else is doing and getting away with it? So there's a very long answer to your question.
Brent, I'm going to take it. I appreciate your time, sir. This was a lot of fun.
It's always good, Joey. It's been too long. We'll have to do it again.